We left off with President Polk and claiming territory in the Oregon Territory, as well as in 1845 when Texas is annexed by the United States. Well, in 1846, things start to heat up because Mexico disagrees with the United States about what territory belongs to America and what territory belongs to Mexico. In 1846, Zachary Taylor is sent to this sort of um, conflicted territory, and Polk is essentially saying to General Taylor, just take what territory you can. Um, and unsurprisingly, General Taylor is ambushed while he is sort of along the Rio Grande. President Polk then says he wants Congress to give him funds. He wants to be able to declare war in Mexico because war must be declared by Congress. The president does not have the authority to just get into war, and this is, one of these checks and balances created in the Constitution. President Polk is saying it is completely valid to go to war, that it is completely valid for Congress to declare war because this is American territory. This territory has been annexed by the United States. Mexico says that the U.S. is encroaching on its territory. And so the debate in Congress becomes about, is this territory America or not? For those that are wary of going to war, and they say, this ambush that took place and, a few soldiers died, was this truly America or not? So there are some congressmen who say, show me the spot. Where was blood shed on clear American territory? And the congressman who sort of coins this phrase, show me the spot, is none other than young Abraham Lincoln. Another issue that this brings up is this is not just about this one particular spot where Americans were ambushed. It's about sectionalism. This is now, again, about the North versus the South. Clearly, Democrats want more land. People who are part of the party of Jackson, who are pro-Manifest Destiny. And these Democrats believe that they could get more land. The more land that could be taken, the more land that could be America, that could be more land for Americans. Some people say that we are extending too much. We are doing too much. We are sacrificing in order to get more land. One suggestion is the Wilmot Proviso. Congressman David Wilmot suggests that any of the territory that could be won from Mexico, and this is already assuming we're going to win more territory from Mexico, he suggests that any of this new territory would not have slavery. And this would be in a way to appease people who are afraid that by taking more territory, it could be the spread of slavery. Another thing we see with this Mexican-American War is the American Army is quite strong. And this goes back to sort of pre-War of 1812. The military academy at West Point has been creating and churning out generals, officers, and so we have a very professional army. And some of the men who fight in the Mexican-American War, I'm going to show you their names, and they should probably be pretty familiar. So we have men like Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, James Longstreet, William Sherman, George McClellan, P.G.T. Beauregard, Ambrose Burnside, and Jordan Meade. These are all men who fight in the Mexican-American War. But you probably are more familiar with them as names from the Civil War. So really, the Mexican-American War is kind of practice for the upcoming Civil War. One of these military leaders, just to point out quickly, is John C. Fremont. He is sent to California and essentially said, take as much land as you can so that we can establish American control rather than Mexican control. He will ultimately be pretty important in the story of California. Now, this war goes on for a year and a half. Many of the battles are taking place in Mexican territory. So this is technically our first official war. The war ends with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And Mexico realizes that they are not going to be able to match America's military power. So they decide they will essentially surrender, and America gains all of this territory in red. This is all the territory that we will now get that will become part of America following the Mexican-American War. Territory that's in beige, we'll discuss that at a later date. The problem is, with getting this new territory, this brings up new problems. And there are political parties that are going to address these problems. The Free Soil Party, this party believes that slavery should not be allowed in these new states. Not because it's necessarily wrong, but because it would be better economically. And they also are like, we're fine with slavery continuing to exist. We just don't want slavery for many different reasons to exist in these territories. We also have the Know Nothings. They're more concerned with immigration from the European countries, and this is pro-America. This is sort of nativism. But the biggest result of gaining this territory is the issue of California. Now that this is an American territory, people start flooding in to California in 1848 following the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Also, another issue that it brings up is with all of these people coming to California is they could declare themselves as a territory and eventually a state. But what does that mean? Will they be a free state or a slave state? Additionally, in 1848, gold is discovered at Sutter's Mill, the same John Sutter who received permission from the Mexican authorities to create that fort. The slave-free state issue is made all the more controversial because we have all of these people who are coming, especially in 1849, hence the name the 49ers. They're coming to California to work, to get gold, and they see slavery as an unfair advantage. But then you have people who are building these huge companies, people like John Sutter, who already were using essentially slave labor, whether it was Native American, Hawaiian, or Asian. So this is going to be a pretty big issue that America has to deal with. Now, I spoke briefly about the Know Nothings. Just want to sort of come back to this briefly, that the American Party, this is at a time where immigrants have been pouring into America for the last 15 to 20 years. And for the people in the American Party, they really don't like this. They are of the opinion that America needs to be for Americans. So, of course, the bald eagle must fly free. We don't want anyone from anywhere else. So this whole idea that we face in our country today about Americans and we don't want immigrants, it is not a new issue for us. But it does play into the issue of the West and new territory and the South versus the North and these industrial jobs. In 1848, we have another election. Remember, in 1844, James Polk promised he would not run for a second term. And then we have the Whigs, of course. They want a candidate, but they don't really have an obvious candidate. It says, I love this, it says, the one qualification for a Whig president is to be available. So they choose, as you can see, a military man. They choose General Zachary Taylor. Now, he had just finished fighting the Mexican-American War. He has no political qualifications, but he's well known, so that seemed to be enough for the Whig Party. He was from the South. He was a slave owner, and many abolitionists, many Northerners don't support him for that. But the Whigs are hoping that his idea of unity and the idea of the union of the states would be more appealing than those who want him for the idea of the South and slavery. But these are big questions. What type of president will he be? And he's overwhelmingly elected, excuse me, because he's well known, but he has no experience whatsoever. And because he has no political experience and people don't know what to expect, they don't know, will he support states' rights? Will he support national unity? Will he protect industry? Or will he want to keep or even extend slavery? This is probably a good lesson that we shouldn't elect people who have no political experience whatsoever simply because they seem popular, because that's going to cause problems both with the Constitution, with what power the states have, and what power the national government has. So Zachary Taylor is the president when California requests statehood. As we mentioned earlier, the issue for California statehood is, will it be slave or will it be free? Henry Clay, who we of course know as the Great Compromise from the Compromise of 1820, here's what he looked like back then. Here's what he looks like now. He's been around for a long time. And the first compromise he suggests, it's a bit too extreme. It takes too much power from the southern slave states. So some of them say no, like John C. Calhoun. And too many states don't like his compromise, including President Zachary Taylor. He feels that it is too detrimental to the southern slave-owning states. But on the 4th of July, 1850, President Zachary Taylor, he was hosting an Independence Day party. He had some fresh cherries. He also had some ice milk, also some lemonade. And within the next few days, he gets a stomach ache. Historians aren't entirely sure what happened, whether it was some sort of weird combination with the cherries and the ice milk and the lemonade, or was the milk contaminated, or what it was. But regardless, President Taylor ends up with horrible cramps. He ends up with cholera, and he dies. And luckily for Henry Clay, when President Taylor died, this makes the compromise possible because there's a new president. It is President Taylor's vice president, Millard Fillmore, who was a Northerner. And now Henry Clay can make the compromise of 1850 happen. So here's what the compromise says. California will be admitted as a free state. The territories you see there in purple, they will get popular sovereignty. So that means they will get to choose whether or not they want slavery. Now, if you notice, part of that territory is north of the Missouri Compromise line, the 3630 line. And it was agreed in 1820 with Henry Clay's Compromise of 1820 that slavery would not exist north of that line in the further territories. Now we're changing that. We're saying popular sovereignty, that the people will be allowed to choose what they want. The compromise also limits slave trade in Washington, D.C. It doesn't limit slavery, but it does eliminate the slave trade. And possibly most importantly, it includes the Fugitive Slave Act. Now, this was part of the compromise to benefit those southern states. Even though California is admitted as a free state, this is now the part to benefit the slave states. It allows slave owners to cross state lines and retrieve runaway slaves. Now, before this, slave owners were not allowed to do this. So the northern states, if you could cross the Ohio River and get into the northern states, you were free, you were safe. And this is part of the story of the Underground Railroad. What became so terrifying with the Fugitive Slave Act is not only could the slave owners cross state lines, but now even free blacks weren't safe. And so Harriet Tubman, she escaped and she made dozens of trips back to the South. And she was one of these conductors on the Underground Railroad, which was neither underground nor was it a railroad. And what changes with the Fugitive Slave Act is now they start taking slaves, and she starts making sure people get safely into Canada rather than just the northern states. Last thing to keep in mind about Manifest Destiny is with now all of this land, America covers from sea to shining sea. And that land could be hugely profitable. Even the territory that has not been organized is not yet a state. But that land is great for farming, or at least much of it is great for farming. Well, then what we have in the 1850s is the emergence of new technologies, things like mechanical reapers, John Deere's tractors. Then the issue could potentially be, well, what if we combined that technology efficiency with slavery? How much more profitable could we be? Well, we could produce enough food to feed everyone. And that is an enticing proposal. But this is going to be continuing the issue of slavery and what will happen with these territories and will ultimately lead us to the Civil War.